Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Brandon Jenkins. Brandon is the founder and owner of Birch Prosper. Birch Prosper is a multifamily syndication firm focused on value-added properties. Brandon is also the host of the Capital Stack Show, which helps educate passive investors on commercial real estate deals. You can find Brandon by going to his website at www.birchprosper.com or by emailing him at brandon.jenkins@birchprosper.com. Hello, Brandon. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Hi, Olivia. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to be on your show.
I'm so excited to get into some wonderful conversation. So let's dive into that first question. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Brandon Jenkins?
Sure. Excellent question. So I think that broadly speaking, success is making material progress toward any major goal that you have, just in a very general sense. For me personally, success looks like being able to have true time freedom, financial freedom, and location freedom so that I could spend my time wherever I want, with whom I want, for however long I want, without having anything kind of pulling me back in any direction to rob me of my time, so to speak.
And I love how you speak about that. Your success is your ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want. And I think a lot of people get so wrapped up sometimes in making that money so you can do those things and spend time with those people that sometimes it can get lost in translation or transition as you're trying to fill all those areas. But it's really important to make sure you're continuously checking in, doing what you want when you can and when you want to. And I think, I just went through this too of talking to someone, and I was like, I want the freedom, especially as a business owner, to say, you know what? Yeah, on a Thursday, I'm going to that baseball game today. We are going to shift around the meetings. Like, is this a meeting that really needs to take place, or can it be done via email so that I can have a day to refresh, do something that I want and need to do, but I can also have that flexibility because I'm the business owner. And this is
Mhm.
my business. And if I want to give everyone the day off, we can give everyone the day off.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of that freedom to really have a much greater influence over your time. That's something that for most of us, you're not really taught the importance of that. You almost have to discover it. And unfortunately, for many of us, you discover it by having something or someone sort of get in the way of you being able to spend your time how you want. And so, yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal for most of us. Is not necessarily the financial aspect or anything else. It's usually around how can I get better control of my time, and then how can I make an impact on someone else.
And I think that's so important too, making an impact on someone else. And whether that is just being present in the moment, I think some of us forget, especially with the use of phones and accessibility to other individuals, especially through like text messaging and social media, that being present in the moment is just as important as actually being there. Because if you're not present, if you're checking your phone, if you're worried about, in your mind, that meeting that's coming up tomorrow, then how are you really enjoying that time with those people? And are those people really getting the best of you as well?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that one of the dangers of having I believe very strongly in goal setting. Okay, I believe very strongly in personal development and personal growth. But I also think there has to be a balance, because if you're someone that has a strong vision and you really don't take a break until you achieve that goal, then unfortunately you miss out on a lot of the things that are beautiful and wonderful about the now, that you really should appreciate. I think I can understand why someone would be hard driven toward saying I want to accomplish this one thing or these things, but you really do have to stop and appreciate what you have at the moment, because I think that ultimately, even once you accomplish whatever that goal is, or those goals are, you really run the risk of not being fulfilled because you haven't been appreciating what you had as you were on that journey. So yeah, I think it's very important to be present, yes, have a strong vision, have a strong goal, but be present for sure.
And I love how you said that, being present in the moment, because if you're not, when you reach that goal, you might not appreciate the people that were around you during that time, the
Hmm.
moment you had, the growth you had probably as an individual as well. But, sometimes we take individuals in our lives, circumstances we have in our lives for granted. And it isn't until we either reach that goal or leave those people behind for whatever reason that we take a step back and go, wait, that was really good. That was really healthy. And either due to your own fear, not being present in the moment, or trying to reach that goal so badly, the people get left behind in the meantime. And it's sometimes, sadly, until the bridge is burned, that you can't take
Yeah.
a step back and go, oh, wait, maybe I burned that bridge too quickly. Maybe, and then you have to sit back and either come back and have a conversation with that individual and say, "Hey, can we move forward?" I've been there. I've had those conversations.
Hmm.
Or, "Hey, you know what? Let me apologize, and then at least I've gotten it out and move forward in whatever direction or whatever that looks like." But you have to own that, and you nailed it on the head with saying, um, so you don't want to miss out and
Yeah.
not live in the moment and appreciate those moments, because again, it will also teach you a lot, and that
Hmm.
victory at the end will be worth so much when you're like, okay, that struggle, those moments of feeling this way, this is how I handled it. Bryn,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh no, continue.
No, no, I'm sorry. And I was just going to say, I think that what you said is very important because you mentioned people. So unfortunately when we have a strong vision, a strong goal, some of us will focus on that goal, but forget that it's really about the people that you're making impact on along the way. And even once you reach that goal, it still will be about the people that you can then benefit, or who can benefit from whatever it is that you've accomplished. And so I think that's sometimes what the challenge is there's the goal and there's the achievement, but then there's, okay, well, what are you really doing with that? Once you reach that goal, it's really to make an impact on someone. So, and if you're not present, then you can sort of erode that appreciation for the people who have helped you get to where you are, or helping you along the way. And that's kind of the risk that, that's what we're really talking about, is not focusing on the now, the gifts that you have, but also the people who are making a positive impact on you.
And Brandon, your journey and getting to the place where you are with Birch Prosper and what you're trying to do with your organization, and even being the host of your show, Capital Stack, wasn't just something that came to you. There's definitely, as you talked about, the journey and the realization and all that, you had that for yourself. You actually started off in the oil and gas industry as an
Hmm.
engineer prior to starting your business. What was that transition like, going from being an engineer, especially in the oil and gas industry, and then deciding to transition into multifamily properties?
Yeah, excellent kind of question there. So, yeah, like you mentioned, I started off as a petroleum engineer, and anyone who's familiar with the oil and gas industry knows just how volatile and how cyclical it is. And when it's down, it usually the reduction, or a reduction in headcount, is one of the first things that comes up. So if there's a price in the or a drop in the price per barrel, or the market value of the product, then there's usually a reduction in headcount. And so, in my time working as a petroleum engineer, I worked through three of those, three downturns. And the second one it kind of really shook me up a little bit. I'd always been interested in building wealth, but the second downturn is the one that really woke me up to say, I need to find a way to protect myself against what I call, employment risk or unemployment risk. And so I started to buy single family properties, and really enjoyed it. I was still working while I built my portfolio. It is doable. I know this, for a lot of people, they don't think it is doable, but it is if you have the right systems in place. So I built my portfolio while I still had a job, but then I wanted to scale and I wanted to increase the velocity of my capital. And so I initially started to make offers on apartment buildings by myself, but then I quickly found out that it's something that's better done as a team, and it's something that's better done with by partnering with folks who are experienced. So I turned to what's called syndication deals. Long story short, a syndication is basically where people pool, or investors pool their capital to buy a large asset. So I kind of went down this path of studying and researching, going to conferences, really digging in, joining masterminds. And so long, where I am now, I've been a limited partner or a passive investor in over 2,000 units and now an active investor in 600 units. And so it's been this journey really of discovery, because I initially found out that there are opportunities to build real wealth, passive income on a monthly basis, but then also into this larger world of syndication where people are very, very helpful and open and willing to share information, especially because you get to make, like we mentioned earlier, this impact on the investors that partner with you. You get to make an impact on the community and the tenants where you operate or where you have a building. And you also get to make a positive impact on yourself and on your family. So it's really like a three-dimensional kind of a win, I call it. And so yeah, that's sort of the long and short of the journey for me and my wife. We both are active in the business now, and so we really, really enjoy it.
For you, I want to take a step back for a second and talk about, you know, the fact of a single family
Hmm.
property and buying that and then renting it out and or selling it, whatever it might be. For you, what was that like? And I guess the stressors and learning curves along the way of doing that. And then the moment you said, you know what, now I want to go to multifamily properties instead of just the single family, and that decision as well.
Yeah, I'll say that I really enjoyed the single family side because the turnaround, the feedback loop, I'll call it, is very tight because you're the one per you wear all the hats. It's one structure. So if you decide to add some value to a single family property in order to maybe boost the revenue to the property, then you get your data points very quickly. In other words, if you try and go and improve the amenities and it's in the property is in a nice enough area to where the tenants are likely to be able to pay that additional revenue to the property, then it makes sense. And conversely, if you buy a property and try and improve it in a market where it actually doesn't make sense to do that, then the feedback loop will be tight and you won't be able to increase the revenue. So I really enjoyed the single family side because it helped me learn the fundamentals that would then help me scale up to the larger properties. Now, the time that for me, when I realized, okay, I need to make this transition, it was when I had 12 single family properties. And I started to really feel what I call vacancy risk. So if you have a single family property or even a portfolio of them, you feel the sting a little bit more if one of those units or one of those properties is vacant. Also, with one transaction, which I don't know, can take 45 days, or it could take less if you are a cash buyer. But typically it's going to be 30, 45 days to close on a single property. Okay, so you compare that to multifamily, and it'll take what, 45, 60 days, sometimes a little bit more. But for that one transaction, you now have 100 doors, 150 doors, or 200 doors. You've also decreased vacancy risk. You see there are all these benefits from it. And I want to share something too, that one of the most for me, the most attractive things about multifamily properties, commercial property, is they're valued differently than single family. So it's valued based on what's called net operating income. Long story short, that's just income minus expenses. And single family is valued based on sales comps. So if I have a multifamily property and I can increase the income and decrease the expenses, then my net operating income goes up and the value of the property goes up in response. So it's not capped based on sales comps. It's based on how well I manage the property. So that is sort of the secret sauce behind multifamily, behind commercial property. And that's why I love it so much. So that made the transition even easier because there were all these reasons to pursue that.
And you just brought up something, the vacancy mentality and worry that even if you only own one, additional property that you're renting out and it's a single family property, or you, in your case, when you start to make the transition, you own 12, ends up happening. And like you said, it takes time to close any deal in
Mhm.
any area you're in. Even getting a car, you're not really walking in that day, signing it, and necessarily leaving that day with the car. They might still have to do an inspection, or, they want to clean the car. So you're not getting it necessarily until the next day. But, I know people who own multi-family or single family, I should say, properties. And that is something that doesn't really get talked about, but you have to be conscious of it. Is the idea that if your property goes vacant, someone moves out, a tenant moves out, you're now starting that whole process over. And every day someone's not in that building, and every month someone's not in that property, you are still paying expenses for it. So, how quickly it's that urgency and that idea of, you know, if there isn't someone in it, you're not really making the money. So for you, how did you handle the vacancy mentality when it came up to kind of push through it? And what were the tools you had in place, even now as you have more of a commercial state, to get the ball rolling, make sure the ball's rolling, and a single family or multifamily property is as short in return, or I should say turnaround, as possible?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so, really, what it boils down to is having the systems in place to be able to handle it. So, if everything goes as planned, and you have a single family property, you have a tenant in there, you will plan your marketing around their lease expiration. So, if their lease is set to expire, I don't know, in August, then usually you want a couple months before that. First of all, you make sure that you have it in place to where they need to give you like a 60-day heads up. But that gives you enough time to then market the property and have someone ready to move in. But the other piece, of course, is like you mentioned, your turn. So your turnover, you have to have someone ready to help you turn the unit over very quickly. Okay, and as we all know, that if someone moves out of a property, when you go in as an owner, you really aren't sure what the condition's going to be like, and so you really need to have someone who can very quickly go in and, almost regardless of the condition, turn the unit over, get it cleaned up, and get it ready for a new tenant. So that's if things go well. But if things don't go well, because I've had properties where people have broken the lease and they maybe left or whatever it is, and you also then have to have sort of kind of an emergency or a quick response type of relationship, really, with your contractors, to where you say, okay, listen, this person's broken the lease. I need someone to hurry and get in there and secure the property, clean it up very quickly. And then again, you have to boost your marketing efforts. So you have to have kind of an approach for both scenarios. On the multifamily side, fundamentally it's still the same, but the marketing effort is really ongoing. So if you think about it, and when you look for an apartment and you look it up, their marketing engine is usually much stronger and much better maintained than a single family property is, because you're going to just have an owner usually for a single family residence, and they'll only market it on whatever local platform there is that's most effective. And so, you may not get a sense that, okay, they're actually marketing this thing year round. On the multifamily side, you really always want to have, a marketing presence. You'll have a website that's dedicated to the asset. You'll make sure that it's listed on the various platforms that most tenants go to. But you'll also do things like on location. You might have a banner or something up to market it to people who are driving by, so that you always have sort of this list of people who are potentially interested in moving into property. So it takes a little more work.
I like how you continue to explain both sides, because I think both sides are just as important. And the
Mhm.
experiences you learn from, whether it being a multifamily property can go into, if you go the other way, into a single family property, and vice versa, if you go from a single property into multifamily. One thing you brought up that I think is interesting and so important, and I've seen people go through this many times in many different
Mhm.
situations, is the fact that sometimes, or most of the time, when someone leaves any of your properties, you don't know what you're walking into, right?
Yeah.
My mom owned a condo. She bought it when she had just graduated college. She owned that condo for almost 26 years. So once she moved out of state and her and my dad got married, she had different tenants in and out. And I remember some of the horror stories of,
Yeah.
you walk in, or you have someone walk in for you, and there's, you know, damage you didn't weren't expecting, or even like appliances not working the way you thought they were going to work, and no one told you until they leave, and you're like, okay, what do I do now? And sometimes it's a very easy turnover. But for you, what has it been like, whether that is a single family property or multifamily property, in the moments leading up to walking in and discovering one end of the spectrum or the other of handling those situations, especially in, like you said, the vacancy theory of you want to get in and turn it around as quickly as possible. And you walk into a situation where there is a lot of work to be done. How do you manage that?
So there's a couple things. One, I would say the best way to manage it is really before the tenant is in the unit. And so what I mean by that is having very strict criteria in terms of who you will lease to. So you'd be surprised that a lot of people, a lot of owners don't actually screen their tenants up front. They don't actually call, previous property owners or apartment complexes where that tenant might have lived. They don't really do the kind of background check that will help give you some, understanding of how the tenant is likely to treat the property. So you have to do a lot of the work up front, and it does take a little bit of time, but it has to be done because then you avoid some of what we're talking about now. I will say for me, I had a contractor that was, I had so much work for him to where he really was able to react fairly quickly to any real property damage. I got lucky, and then I didn't have any scenarios where there was just a complete and total wreck in the property. But I did have things like, holes in drywall, a lot of paint damage and doors that had holes in it, stuff like that. But I just didn't have anything where it was absolutely filthy, to be honest. But for me, having a contractor that was just at the ready, more or less, very, very dependable. And also I had a cleanup crew that was just outstanding. I mean, it could make some of the properties look, like new. And so the combination of those two working in concert is really what helped me. So I pretty much had them almost on call because I was buying deals all the time anyway. And so it helped because they sort of prioritized some of the things that would come up if things did come up.
And I think that's a great way to discuss the fact that having a team and having and building a network of individuals that you have to reach out to is so important in moments like this. Because when you own a property, whether you own just your own house, right? You
Hmm.
own just your stuff, things come up, right? And in a moment's notice, you might need to have a contractor is good and can reach out to. You might need, who knows what you might need, a cleaning crew to come in because now all of a sudden you got relocated for your job and you need to clean up even just your property to be able to sell it. But I think that demonstrates the importance of building relationships with people who work within your industry, but not necessarily doing what you do, but can help each other in those times and know
Hmm.
who you can trust. And it's trusting the right people to know they're going to get the job done. They're reasonably priced, all those little things as well.
Without question, I'll tell you something that for me, it has been even more evident on the multifamily side because you really can't get very much done without having a solid team on that side of the business. There are things that you can do as a single family investor to where you can go direct to the owner or seller. You can structure some of the paperwork yourself. I mean, you'd be surprised how much flexibility there is on the single family side. On the multifamily side, you really don't have that, or if you, it's just a gargantuan effort to where the value it's not really worth it. But you have to have a team in place, to help you. Brokers, if depending on the market you're in, you're going to have to rely on a broker to get you the best deal. That's a relationship that you're going to have to build. You're going to have to rely on finding good, effective property management that's going to treat your property with respect. That's a relationship you have to build. I'll also say that because in shifting from single family to multifamily, from where you go to wearing all the hats to where you now have to spread the load a bit and rely on your team, your partnership team. Those are relationships you're going to have to build, and one of the most important ones is with syndication deals, which is what I do in particular. I have to raise capital and attract capital is what I really like to say, because it's raising capital is a different type of effort, but attracting capital is how you position yourself to then be a thought leader, to be someone who has the opportunities lined up that people are excited to partner in. And so that relationship is really with your investors, which is the most important relationship, because people won't invest in an opportunity with you or partner with you until they believe in you. And so that relationship then has to be built. So it's all about relationships. Absolutely.
For you, and relationships are so important and they can transcend into many different aspects and go into different opportunities as well. It goes hand in hand, right? Your investors might end up bringing an opportunity to you that
Hmm.
you might have not heard of, or an opportunity you might have not had otherwise. But I want to dive into another aspect of what you do, and that is your show, The Capital Stack. What made you decide to, not just own multifamily properties and be doing that aspect of making that kind of money, but then start a show where people can, listen in and learn and grow as individuals as well? And what is your goal for that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So for me, there were several things. One is I realized just how much I had to go through in order to feel comfortable with the apartment syndication and multifamily commercial real estate business. I had to do a lot of work. I had to do a lot. I attended a ton of conferences. I read a ton of books, podcasts. I'm a spreadsheet junkie, so I built a whole bunch of spreadsheets. I did a lot of things that they helped me, but I don't think everyone really needs to do those things. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, okay, how can I have a resource that will help expedite all of this, or even eliminate some of the things that I did and I spent a lot of time on that people don't necessarily have to spend as much time on. So how can I compress the learning curve? So I wanted to make sure I had a platform to educate passive investors or people who are just interested in it, in this business, on ways to effectively understand the market, on ways to understand the legal, aspects of the business, and how it impacts them and their family. How to vet a sponsor. How to find a a good deal. Basically, what constitutes a good deal. So that's one piece of it. Is I wanted to help people not have to endure the amount of time and the rigorous work that I did. The other piece is I started to notice that for sponsors or for active investors who are actually going out and finding the deals, that there's a need for increased exposure if you are a general partner or a sponsor. And in order to do that, you have to have a platform where people can actually hear kind of what it is that you offer. What's your value proposition? And so when I realized that, I thought, you know what, let me have a platform where I connect the two. So I have people who are sponsors or who are on the active side of the business. I have something where I'm speaking to passive investors, and it's a platform where the two can connect. And so I've had people reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you connect me with so and so because I heard their episode and I thought they had some really value added information." So all these things really prompted me to get the show started, and I'm glad I did. And it's just added so much value. I can tell you that in my past I was definitely introverted, and so this is something that is way outside of what I thought I would be doing. But I'm glad I got uncomfortable. And yeah, I love doing the show now.
And I think that is something that we all sometimes need. As you said, being an introvert, this isn't a norm for you of
Hmm.
hosting a show like this and getting yourself outside your comfort zone. But sometimes we need to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. And
Hmm.
so sometimes we really need to, push ourselves, and only we can do that to then take the leap and see what happens. And for you, that was especially with your show, and now you're able to have different conversations that you probably wouldn't have had without the show, and be able to connect with people that you might have not had without the show. And I get it, because my show, and well, I should say this show, that people are listening to, it's the same thing. I had people reach out to me, not just to be guests on the show, but hey, I listened to this episode. I really took away a lot. Or hey, I would love to connect with this guest. Can you do that? And it's opened my eyes to a lot of things as well, like the conversation we're having today, of just thinking about when you're owning a property, single family, multifamily, of what really goes into that. It's not, a lot of people go, oh, it's a great way to make money. but it's not just a great way to make money. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, time.
Mhm.
Um, the if there is an issue, especially in a single family property, you're the one who gets called on. If there is that last minute vacancy, or once someone does leave, walking in and evaluating what needs to be changed or cleaned, and then doing it before you can start showing it and trying to get it sold or rented again, I should say. And you see that, and I like how you mentioned it really, when you move to a multi-family property, m- makes you evaluate what processes you have in place. And processes are
Mhm.
so important, I think, in being able to have less headaches,
Mhm.
being able to walk in and be confident of, okay, this is what has to get done. This is how we have to do it to make it as easy and smooth as possible. And I think all those things are so important. And I think Capital Stack really helps individuals identify those things, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. And I'll tell you, you're right. It's very important because I think the goal of systems is really to get, if you can get things to being as close to predictable as possible, then your system is working. I mean, naturally things will come up, but if you understand that there's a certain variety of potential scenarios that you might be faced with, and then you come up with something to address each of those likely scenarios, then you've at least covered a good portion of your business. And so I think it is very important to have those. And I'll make the point on, that you mentioned on being uncomfortable. For me, I've noticed that some really impactful or powerful things started to happen. The more I embraced being uncomfortable, I almost had like this chain of discomfort, I'll call it, but that has really led to growth. So, because I started the podcast, and then I started a local meetup here. I'm in the DC area. I started a local meetup, and then people would come up to me at the end of each of it's an in person, people will come up to me and say, "Hey, listen, if you have anything one on one, then that I'm interested in hearing more about it." And for a long time, I said, "Well, I just I don't really have anything, but I appreciate the appreciate you asking." But then over time, my wife was like, "Well, look, you need to actually have something for them. They keep coming up and asking." So okay, well, sure. And I thought, well, what's the one way that I can add value to them? And I thought that the number one skill in this business is actually being able to attract capital. And so I now have a platform where I help clients learn to position themselves to attract capital, so that they can close more deals, and so that they really don't have to fret as much over whether or not they can actually raise the capital for a deal. So, but again, at each of these points, for me, I wasn't comfortable doing it. It's just like I had to do it because I wanted to fill a need. And so I let that drive me. But the entire time I've been sort of like, oh man, this goes against my nature, da da da. But then I would start it and I would feel a lot better about it. So it is interesting that, I do think that more people need to embrace sort of being uncomfortable, because you'd be surprised with just how much success there is just over that line, of comfort and discomfort, so I've enjoyed the journey for sure.
And I think that is a interesting and great point of the ability to cross that line and get uncomfortable and what could come with it. I agree with that full-heartedly. If some Like I said, sometimes you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable, because like anything, we take the idea of making your bed or going to the gym.
Hmm.
The first few days you wake up, and the idea of making your bed, you're like, "Oh my god, I'm in such a hurry today. I don't have time to make my bed. I'll I'm getting in it later. Who cares, right?"
Yeah.
Um, and then you start going, "Okay, no, I'm going to do it. It'll take an extra minute. I'm going to make my bed." And then after, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, it becomes a norm. And then you just
Mhm.
don't think about it. Same with the idea of going to the gym. After, those initial days, you're like, "Oh, if I miss one day, I'm busy. I don't want to go. I don't want to do that today.
Yeah.
I have better, more fun plans to be
Yeah.
doing, or I'm too tired." Whatever it might be. But then over time, if you're like, "I gotta push, I gotta just do it, I gotta get up," after a while, it becomes not a single thought. You've built it into your schedule. It's okay, this is the time of day I'm going to go. This is what's going on. You can easily fit it in, and it just becomes second nature. And I always welcome, sometimes I don't tell other people, "Oh, I'm going to be uncomfortable in this setting." But I think there's times of nervousness that, like, if you do that, it can be so rewarding, but
Hmm.
also become a nature of habit in how you look at things, your perspective. It isn't just that moment, it's the shift that can happen and those relationships you can build. I was talking about this recently, I think on a different episode. Um, but I forget. Sometimes I have so many conversations to be um, but it's the conversation of myself. I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love talking. I love helping out other individuals. But sometimes when I meet new people in an environment that I'm not used to be in, I become quiet and I just
Mm.
like to observe the room. I don't necessarily know what to say because I've never met these individuals and it's an environment that I'm not used to. And I wait for the conversation to be happening to go, oh wait, okay, we can connect on this. I have something I can connect with you on that. And then I get a little bit more comfortable. And then once we are having those conversations, now the walls are coming out. Now um my way of talking, I talk a lot with my hands for our listeners that just listen to the show. You don't see it, but I do move my hands a lot. It is the Italian side of me. And so then, people have noticed over time that sometimes I won't say I'm uncomfortable and I'm always down to try something new. But when I get into certain environments in the beginning, you I'm more stiff. I'm more not as engaging. And then as time goes on, I'm talking with my hands. I'm connecting with individuals and I've become more comfortable. And I think
Hmm.
that's really important to know about yourself. How do you handle yourself in uncomfortable situations? And that's something that you can share with individuals of, hey, it's not you, this situation, or this is how you know whether I am uncomfortable or not. And this is how you can help me out in those situations can be just as important.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that what you mentioned is important as well. Is you sort of found your connection point. So you're in an environment where you maybe don't feel as uncomfortable, but you found something that the person who you might have been listening to or you overheard, they said something that resonated with you, and you knew you could connect in there. And so I think that kind of goes back to the principle of being more trying to be interested more than interesting, right? So you're listening in to see what's important to that person, and focusing on that, and then connecting based on that, because now you have the conduit, I'll call it, for engagement, real engagement to take place. And so that's one thing that's important, and honestly, for I think the people who are introverts, whether you're introvert or an extrovert, I think that's kind of what the key is. Introverted people, you might, like myself, I tend to connect maybe with fewer people, or I make the attempt, I'll call it, to connect with fewer people, but I still have a solid connection. It's just that, for me, it takes a little bit more mental work to say, okay, I'm going to work the room, so to speak. But then once I do, I kind of focus in, and it's like, okay, I'm really digging on this one person, and so I'm still working on the ability to say, okay, I'm going to focus in on a crowd, so just two different ways of going about it. But, the good thing is when it comes to building relationships and networking and all these things, either trait, it can really work in your favor. It just depends on how you approach it. So,
And I love that of identifying who you are and a connection, whether it's with one person or with three people,
mhm,
that one connection can be way more powerful than necessarily just feeling like you have to connect with everyone. So as long
mhm,
as you walk out of a situation, feel like you've made a connection and were able to have, even if it's not a connection that then you take and continue, but you were able to have a inset like important conversation or engaging with one individual, you have won, right?
mhm,
You were able to walk away from that moment in time and say, I got something out of this. I had fun, or, I learned something, or I will remember this, whatever it might be, as long as you take each moment and the people you're talking about and add value or they add value to you.
mhm,
And it doesn't even have to be an educational piece. It could just be, they were fun to hang out with. And then it was worth the time. But
mhm.
understanding too that no matter how many people you connect with, it there's no number that goes, oh, if you've connected with these many people in this situation, you've won the game. You've done it.
You made it.
Yeah. There's no, like I say with achieving success can continue to move and look different to everyone. Winning the connection game can look different to everyone as well.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I like that you defined it as a win, because that I think that's true. If you've made a connection, even if it's with one person, and it doesn't mean that you have to, like, if you do have some product or service, it doesn't mean that you're not looking to pitch them on the spot. But if you've made a connection, then that's a win. I think that that's the direction that we need to go in. I feel like over time there's sort of been this shift to more transactional, in relationships, and really need to have something that is a true relationship, that is not a transaction. It doesn't have to be that. Maybe you just built a genuine connection with someone, and down the road you might be able to help them, or down the road they might be able to help you, whatever it is. But that's the core of networking, relationship building, and I think that we should get back to that. So I'd agree.
Vernon, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
So people can get in touch with me. Well, first of all, going through the website, like you mentioned in the intro there, it's Birch Prosper. So www.birchprosper. That's BIRCHPROSPER.com. You can also email me at brandon.jenkins@birchprosper. That's BRANDON.JENKINS@birchprosper.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. It's a great place to kind of see some of the content I put out, and naturally the Capital Stack podcast and Facebook. So I'm all over the place.
Well, that just makes you easy to get access to, which is
Yeah.
always a plus.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon, for all of your insight today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on the show and speaking with you, Olivia. Really appreciate it.
A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation are: how are you protecting yourself from moments of uncertainty? What are you building now that will help you long term? Whether that's a slush fund in case something happens and now you have money put aside, whether that's being a passive investor in a different sector of what you're doing, whether that is being an active investor and owning a single family property or a multifamily property. What are you doing for yourself to protect yourself that when something happens, you will be okay? As well as be thinking about your marketing plan. It's so important, especially in owning properties, to know that at some point you are going to have a turnaround. No one stays forever, though we all wish they would, right? It would make life so much easier. But at some point, there's going to be that turnaround. So, what are you doing to prepare that when that happens, you can have a smooth transition? And part of that is identifying what your marketing plan is, having that process in place so that when it happens, you're not thinking about what to do. It's an easy pick up your guide, do those steps. And that's also something that Brandon had talked about throughout the show, is having those connections with individuals, having those processes in place that, if there is an emergency and something happens, you know what to do. You know the steps you're going to make. It isn't a thinking process of, oh no, what do I have to do now? You have different scenarios put in place so you know how to handle them. As well as something I hadn't even thought of that Brandon had mentioned, it is so important to screen people before having them sign any lease so that you have an idea of possibly the kind of tenant they're going to be, possibly what work might have to go into the property after they leave, how well you might work with them in case an issue comes up. What are their needs? And so that will give you an idea of how demanding the property might be at any certain time, what kind of communication they need too. Is that a once a month pick up a check and have a face to face? Is that we never need to see each other? You mail me a check and we're good with an email? Is that okay if something happens to the property, there starts to be a leak? Does your family in that property assume that that's going to be taken care of within an hour, no matter the day and time? Do they expect a 24-hour turnaround? What does that look like? And so the screenings, but also setting expectations can be so important, as well as my favorite thing that Brandon brought up, be interested instead of being interesting. We all have stories, we all have great moments in our lives that make us all very interesting. But being interested in someone else is just as valuable as being the interesting person. You don't always have to be the interesting person in the conversation, as well as being the interested person can add value to a conversation and make someone feel heard and valued as well. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Brandon Jenkins. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.